So I'd just like to welcome you all. You're very welcome. Robbie Walsh, Philip McRory, David Gilna, Sarah Carroll, Mary Murray, Kathleen Yeates, and Anna Russell. Thank you so much for joining us today, guys.
How you doing?
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Hi, for having us.
Absolute pleasure, guys. Robbie, I'm just going to start with you. I'm just going to take a step back a little bit. This is, I believe, your third feature film. Am I correct in that?
It is, yeah. It's been.
And what was your road to filmmaking? Like, I know you've kind of worked as an actor as well and trained as an actor, but what was your route into filmmaking and wanting to make films?
I'm just a massive fan of cinema. Have been. I was a filmmaker before I knew I was a filmmaker. So I've been watching films constantly since I'm a kid. Went into the military. I've done 7 years nearly in the army, and that was a massive education because I had the time to go down and just go to Cineworld every day, go to Odeon and stuff like that. But that was it. I'd studied with Kathleen. Couldn't get the roles that I wanted, other than second guy on the left, and just went into writing and just gave it a shot with short films and just went from there.
And you've made like the two feature films you made were Split and Eden. What made you want to follow them up with such a powerful story like The Letters?
I don't know. I was sitting at home one time. I like to make films about socially relevant issues. Like Eden, for instance, is about the homeless situation, and we'd screened it, and Odeon had released Eden for us, and it was the day after. That night we were at the premiere with myself and Phil, and I went up to Phil, and I'd been paying attention to what was going on with the cervical check leading up to this, and I went to Phil after the screen and I said, listen, here's the film I want to do next, and here's how I want it to look. And Phil just said, look, I'm on board, whatever you need to do, just let me know. And then the next day I went in and sat with David, and asked David to sit down with me, and I said, David, here's what I want you to do with the film.
That's fantastic. And just to go back a step there, you said, here's how I want it to look. Did you have like certain visual references or cinematic references already at that time when you were thinking about the topic?
Yeah, I did. There's certain works of art I knew I wanted to really capture on film and push across to kind of get at the end, it's the ending without giving too much away. So when you're watching the ending, you know what I'm talking about. Like there's paintings by Jacques-Louis David and Renoir that I really wanted to capture in that kind of swan song effect or dying swan effect,
It's certainly beautiful, and like without spoiling anything with the ending, it really is quite arresting, like to put it mildly, I think. We'll come back to that in a little while, but just before that, I want to talk a little bit maybe to Philip and David about how they get involved. Philip, you've worked with Robbie before on both these previous features. What was your response when he came to you saying, this is the topic I want to look at next, this is the next film?
I think kind of what happened was the night of Eden, in the Odeon, and it was a real success, and that night I was like, what's next? It was like kind of gunning to do something, Robbie could have told me we were making a film about, the JFK assassination, only Oliver Stone had bet us to it, but it didn't matter what the content was, I would have been on board with Robbie, We've had such a wild ride the whole way along making all these films. Robbie calls it his third feature film, but it's actually his fourth. But I remember the journey of making the first one, and nobody knows about, So it didn't really matter what it was, I was on board with Robbie regardless,
Fantastic. Robbie clearly made an impression over those three previous feature films. And David, for you, am I right in saying you hadn't worked certainly to the extent Philip had with Robbie before? How did you come to be involved?
Yeah, no, just literally after I was at the screening of that Eden, and then Robbie texted me to say, let's meet for a coffee the next day. And he told me the idea that he had, who he had in mind, what his vision was. And Robbie surrounds himself with good people. And so he told me out straight what he wanted and what he wanted from me. And I was really keen about the story, about the actors. Robbie's a real director for actors, because he was a trained actor and he's very passionate about that. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I love a challenge and I love to get involved. And you never know in this career unless you collaborate together how you get on. And it worked. It was a great chemistry and a great cast. And meeting Phil and Robbie had worked together for all their films, so it was a easy environment to get involved. And I have to say it was a roller coaster, but we did it. And I'm very proud that we did it, genuinely.
And well, you should be, David. Robbie, just to come back to you, writing this, obviously there must have been quite a burden to keep it authentic, and like the stakes are quite high with it. Did you have to do an awful lot of research into this, or how did you go about writing that in the first place, making four such incredibly authentic characters?
Yeah, I had done a lot of research into it, and I knew that I wanted the film to be more of a human interest story rather than, say, an investigative piece like, say, Erin Brockovich or Spotlight or something, you know. So when I wrote the script, it was kind of loosely based on a lot of stories that I'd read online, and then I'd spoke to some of the victims or survivors. I can't really name any because there's a lot of ongoing cases, and of course ours is a work of fiction, so you can't be getting dragged into it. But then after I drew up the sort of a blueprint of a script, I sat with the actors, and I really wanted a lot of improv, and I wanted the women to have as much freedom as possible when we were filming, and to get into the characters as much as they wanted. So like there's so much improv in the film, like it's insane, you know.
Well, that's really interesting. I'll definitely come back to that. How long did it take you to write altogether, Robbie, did you say?
Well, like that, I'd been working on the idea for the film for a period of months. I think it started in January. Split had been in cinemas in October, so January came around and I'd started kind of noticing what was going on, and I started putting pen to paper. And then Eden went into cinemas then in March, and then I knew then I was going to go ahead and make it, and it became kind of a snowball effect. I think we filmed then in August, was it?
Yeah, August.
Yeah, August. Then we filmed in August, and that was it. We went over that. Then we hit lockdown, and we had to shoot. We still had to get the opening of the film, so we managed to get the opening of the film then during lockdown. It was like one day we had free, when we were allowed to go outside of a 5 kilometer zone, and we got a ballet dancer, we got the location, then we got the cameras, and we just ran out and we shot it within the day, like, you know.
And can I just ask, and I'll come back to it in a bit, but what was the inspiration behind that ballet moment at the start?
The whole opening is a love letter to Raging Bull. The whole opening. So if you watch the opening to Raging Bull, and I'll be very quick about this because I know the actors want the actors to talk. If you were to take the atypical idea of the brute, of the male form, the anger, it's the boxer, it's the caveman idea of the boxer, and that's what we got with Raging Bull. You had De Niro in the ring, just being mean and angry and aggressive. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to show what the atypical view or the stereotypical view of femininity, of what the woman is. And it's the ballerina, the graceful, beautiful, delicate, and, you know, ballerina. And that's what we do, and we shot it in color, and that's what we want. That's what I wanted to do with the whole opening, like, you know.
It's really great because it really kind of strikes you at the start, and then when it switches to black and white, it really is a wonderful kind of sequence. You have an incredible cast, 4 of whom are here today. Can you tell me a little bit before we talk to them just about how you attracted Sarah, Kathleen, and Mary in particular, because they all absolutely own those roles and make them incredibly authentic. Were they always the people you had in mind for those roles?
For Kathleen, yeah, because the story was kind of unique to needing an American actor, and because Kathleen was my coach and I knew how magnificent of an actor she is, I'd said, like, there's no one else could really do that role. I didn't really know anybody that could play the role of Kathleen's mum, and it was Kathleen who suggested Anne, because they'd work together and they'd workshop together and teach together. And they knew instantly there was a dynamic there for them to work with, and that wouldn't be difficult, you know. So I met Anne, and it happened very, very quickly, you know. With Sarah, I hassled Sarah non-stop, and she
That's
was.
not true.
I hassled her non-stop. And eventually she came around. It was weird because I wanted Sarah to play the Mary Murray's role at first. And there was someone else I had in mind to play the Sam role, and it just wasn't working. And it was Robbie Kane then, when I said to Sarah, Carroll, look, I want you to play this role. Here's the images I have in mind. Here's what I'm going to want you to do. And Sarah went away and thought about it and came back and said, look, I'm on board. And then it was Robbie Kane suggested Mary Murray, and I didn't think we could get her. I was Robbie saying, look, I'll give her a call. And when we called Mary's like, let me see what you're doing. And of course, being the happiest person in the world, came on board, and that was it. We were off to the races. You know?
Brilliant. Sarah, I'm going to turn to you. Apparently, you weren't hassled at all by Robbie.
I wasn't hassled at all, and I'm pretty sure he was spinning me a line that Mary Murray was involved. So, you know, I don't know, Robbie. I'm not sure. Which came first, the cart or the horse?
I don't think he's going to tell. We both heard very different stories, I think. But you'd worked in previously on Eden. When he told you about this project and what he's working on, and how did you feel about the project? Were you like, okay, I'm going to be involved in this, or what was your take?
Honestly, I think my first reaction was probably a little bit hesitant, because I was worried. I was worried about portraying subject matter authentically and being able to represent that story in a way that I would be proud of. And I think I was a little scared of it. I was a little scared of doing it justice, and not just me, but the film, you know, just the overall vision. But as soon as Robbie and I spoke, I knew, and I had worked with him on Eden, and honestly, my scene in Eden, it was one that always stood out to me in my mind as one where I just showed up. We did it in one take. It just worked. Robbie and I just worked well together. He just gave me that space to say, look, this is kind of how I wanted to go, and off you go now, you do your thing. And it was just such a joy to do that I knew that if we could capture even a little bit of that kind of on-set sensibility, that we'd be able to transition it into anything. So like, really, I didn't take that much convincing. I think there was a little bit of juggling because maybe I couldn't immediately commit, but I quickly moved things around.
Fantastic. And Kathleen, for you, you mentioned you were Robbie's acting coach at one point. And he always had you in mind for this role. So how did you feel about coming on board this and being directed by Rob?
Well, it was a million years ago. Robbie was a student of mine, but we were always in touch. And so I would come to his screenings, and so I knew how he could finish a film. And I had done a lot of work years ago, but then I raised a family and, you know, was coming back to the work. So when he approached me about this, I knew that he was a great filmmaker and that he would finish it really well. And then we had a lot of conversations about what may or may not happen in various scenarios and situations. And I had also, when he said, oh, the mother has, you know, Alzheimer's or dementia or something, I said, my dad just passed away from dementia, from Alzheimer's. And I said, so this is something I know firsthand. And also the way he works is very generous to the actors, because he is an actor as well as a director and writer and a filmmaker. And he knows every film that ever existed and how to tell the story really well. So it was no brainer for me to be able to, I was delighted I could do it.
Fantastic. And Anne, for you, how did you feel coming aboard? Like, you play like an interesting character, and she's not one of the three principals, but she almost has a parallel narrative in that she was really, really let down by the state, albeit for a very different way through the mother and baby homes, and is now surfing for dementia yourself. That sounds like a very challenging role, but was it a challenge you were excited about, or how did you feel about approaching it?
Yeah, I was. Initially, when it was broached to me that I'd be Kathleen's mother, I was kind of like, oh, here, you know, come on.
She's too young.
I was thinking that it should come to this, that I would be Kathleen Yeates' man, you know.
But I said you must have been 13 when she had me.
Yeah, 5. But yeah, so then I met Robbie, and we had a conversation about it, and Kathleen had mentioned it to me, and I knew a little bit about it, and Robbie was just so passionate about it, and the whole, again, a bit like Sarah, I suppose initially I was thinking about being respectful to the theme. Do you know what I mean? And also, I had also direct experience of dementia in my own family with my own mother. So I kind of knew that territory, but I also knew that there's a lot of variation in behavior from people who are suffering from cognitive impairment, you know. But yeah, I was very quickly convinced. I didn't take much convincing at all, to be honest. And the idea of the way it was structured, and the way it was, the storyline that covered the fact that I was a very young mother, and the mother and baby home too, which is so poignant and so still very pertinent today. And that really interested me, that whole scenario, you know, the whole storyline, the arc of the story between my past and my present, and Kathleen's present too, that she had found her mother and then this had happened, you know. So it was extremely sad and poignant. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Mary, would you have felt the same coming into this? I imagine, as Kathleen and Sarah and Annabelle said as well, there was quite a weight, I suppose, of responsibility coming to this role of Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. The story was out there in the ether, and we were hearing about Vicky Phelan and all these other things. So to get to kind of be part of a story that's happening right now is a real privilege, you know. But of course, you do have to be very careful, because there's people still going through a lot of turmoil, and you don't want to get those stories wrong. So I am very glad in that scenario that it is 3 fictional people, so you can kind of go, okay, this is a world that I can completely inhabit, and I'm not going to offend anybody, or, you know, because yeah, it's dangerous territory if you get stuff wrong. But I love the idea that it was very particularly about their personal stories, because we did hear all the stuff about, you know, 221 women, and over 3/4 of them didn't get the misdiagnosis information, and we were bombarded with numbers and all that kind of information on the news. But the reality is there's real people there, and real people all have very different stories to tell, and cancer hits people in very different ways, and what it does to different people's bodies is just it's horrific. And then of course there's that's just the physical part of it. Then there's the whole emotional, and their family ties, everybody around them, what's happening financially with their jobs, and what's to come after, all the things they have to put in place. So it was the personal struggles that I was really interested in. And I love that idea that we get to see kind of every woman, you know, a little taste of every woman and their fight. And that was the first time I heard Robbie tell that story about the swan. And I thought, oh, that is beautiful, because you do think of like the ballerina is like the swan, and the swan is, you know, looking so elegant, just getting by. And then underneath, the swan is doing this. And then you think of the likes of Vicky Phelan and Emma Vic Fahuna and the likes. That's exactly what's going on, because you're going, she doesn't look sick. And then you're thinking, but she is. What she's doing behind the scenes in between takes of interviews and stuff, you don't know what pressure she's under, with family constraints, and then of course physically. Like, even I came across something that said, you know, she's taken this immunotherapy drug, and it's working and everything, and that, like, on the face of it you think, oh, isn't that wonderful? But you never think, God, immunotherapy drugs, there's so many side effects and everything to that, you know. And for me, it's about that. It's about the personal struggles and the humanity of it all.
I think that's beautifully said, Mary, actually. And I'm going to come back to you guys in a tick, but on that point that Mary raised there about that struggle and about bringing it back to these real people who aren't, you know, who are obviously fictional, but they're very real characters. I suppose if we could turn to Robbie, David, and Phil a bit, like, what was your intention with this film? Like, it feels like a protest film, but also like a raising awareness thing, but also a very authentic story of three people's struggles. Like, I suppose, Robbie, starting with you, like, what was your goal for this?
Well, like everybody has female family members, and the way I seen it at the time was when, you know, my sister had walked into the room after I'd been seeing it, and like in my mind I couldn't get my head round that no matter what a lot of the women had done, that they done everything right. They went to get the tests, they looked after the health, and even when they were voicing their opinion, saying I don't feel right, they were continued told, no, there's nothing wrong with you, until to the point where a lot of them came in and went, walk into their family and say, look, I have to get my affairs in order, I don't know how much longer I have left. And I just couldn't get my head round that, whether that been my sister or my niece or my ma walking into me, you know. And I try and tell people that are listening, like, just let that, what I'm saying to you, let that settle in for a second. You're sitting there and, you know, one of the female members of your family come into you and just say, look, here's what was said to me today. I don't know how much longer we have left, but we have to get our affairs in order, and I don't know what went wrong. And a lot of the point of the film in some cases is, especially with Sarah's character and Mary's character, they're not capable of trying to find out exactly what went wrong and where it went wrong. How do we voice the injustice here? A lot of people don't know how to go about doing that, you know. And I think the point what we want to make with the picture is just to make sure this doesn't happen again, like, you know. I mean, there's a line at the end of the film about increased scrutiny into breast check. You know what I mean? Bowel screen. What? You know what I mean? What are we doing here? It's 2022. Anyway, well, I don't want to get too political about it. I'll move on to Phil or David there. Sorry, guys.
No, absolutely. You should, Robbie, because that's exactly like what to do, is like speak truth to power, and kudos to you on that. I'm just going to turn to David and Phil on this. Obviously, on what Robbie's saying there, like, there is a huge like ambition with this film to, in some way, help kind of shed a light on and to a horrible thing that happened and is still happening, sadly, to people, but also make sure it doesn't happen again. I mean, how do you feel as producers on that, of trying to create a film that works as a film with these wonderful actors and then having to do that as well? David, maybe.
See, the thing about art or creativity is that you have to put a mirror up to society. So the reason why I'm so proud to be involved in this film is when people have reached out to us, we right here all have time, and some of these people don't have time. So this film is a time capsule of people trying to burying the Mana and the Heron, their voice, and these dirty secrets from our past, and what an apology really means. But this film is a time capsule, and we put a mirror to our society to say that, no, this did happen. And through the actors and everybody involved, they got to tell that story. And that some people would feel that this will get buried again, that it's a flash in the pan, and that this film is somehow represents, you know, that you won't be forgotten. This is going to be continuing, and more numbers will grow. So that's where I was proud to say, yeah, this film is a time capsule. And you know what, these secrets won't be buried. And the more there's the spotlight on it, and it's trolled like we do as artists. Robbie created the film, everybody got involved, and it's there. And you say, you know, there's the mirror of society that we're all living in, and it's happening now. You know, it's in the now. It's not 100 years ago. And that's what's more frightening with me, with my nieces, that it's to feel a safe environment that you can trust this society. So that would be my kind of take. So it's like a piece of art that puts a mirror to society.
That's really interesting what you said about the time capsule, because there's so many things that people would have had no idea about, and there was no documentation of it. The mother and baby homes, the amount of people I know my age and younger who have no idea what churching is or what a lot of women had to go through and stuff. There's just no record of it, especially something like this. I think that's a really good way to look at it, as a time capsule that documents this was happening. Philip, for you, what was your impetus on this and what you were trying to achieve with the film?
Well, I mean, when Robbie told me, you know, the content matter of this film, from we were having a beer the night after reading, talking about it, to the film going into Cannes, it terrified me that we were going down this road, you know, because if we got this wrong, you know, it could be, it's great now and it's all come out so well and people are moved by it. Anybody I know that's watched the film and felt, I suppose, you know, moved by the film, and that's great. But if it had gone the other way, and us, we were in big trouble. You know what I mean? Well, Robbie definitely was. I probably could have done a homer and disappeared into a wall somewhere. Nobody cares about Phil McRory, you know what I mean? But Robbie was done. Like, this was a big risk. It was a massive risk, you know. And I think he really needs to be commended by it. I definitely am going to go down the political rabbit hole, because I won't come back out of it, because the whole cervical check scandal for me is one of the first things in my life that really politicized me, you know. And once you get politicized by one thing, then you're going down a rabbit hole, because everything is now, you know, it's moved on. And I think what's really relevant at the moment, and it's funny because when Eden was made compared to when it was kind of, we done the big night in the Odeon, homelessness have become so to the cinema compared to when it was made. It was so relevant, and public health right now is so relevant, and this film is coming out in the middle of it. And do we need to look around us at human rights and at public health stuff at the moment, as well as we look at this film? You know, I see this mirror between the two films, as well as what's going on in real life, you know. So like I said, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole, so it won't come back up.
It is really lovely to hear a man like yourself say you're politicized by this issue, because I don't think a lot of men, it have to be something they can, you know, personally kind of affect, like, to politicize. So kudos to you on that, Phil. Before we get back to the cast, Robbie, Phil, and David, I just want to ask about some of the challenges in getting like this funded and made. You came to, like, so like I imagine like it's a very ambitious piece as well. Like what were the main challenges you had to overcome to get cameras rolling, I suppose?
Well, I can go there. Anytime Robbie rings,
Money for me.
solution.
Yeah, I'm looking
So usually it's Robbie's ring me, tell me what's going wrong, and I'm, as he's talking, thinking, right, what's going to be the solution? Is what can we do to get this resolved? You know, I mean, you talk about a shoestring budget. We made this film on a shoestring budget. I think you'd be shocked if you found out what the figures were. You know, and I think, like, you know, we had one of our locations on the day we went to film. We lost that location, and we very quickly had to resolve that. And within, you know, a couple of phone calls, we had it moved around, like, you know. So I mean, it was just challenge after challenge after challenge, and then the real journey started from the films in Cannes. And if I could make a documentary on Robbie trying to get the film out and to the cinemas and into the public, that is your exit stage left. Like, you know, that is the real film we need to make, because
that's a great point, and definitely we'll come back to that at the end. Robbie, we'll just talk a little bit about, I suppose, your process with the actors. As Kathleen mentioned, like, you're a really good actress, director, coming from an acting background yourself, but you mentioned that there was a lot of stuff kind of improvised and workshopped with the actresses here. Did you have much time for rehearsal beforehand? What was that kind of process like for you?
We didn't have a lot of time, but the time we did, like, we didn't have a lot of rehearsals, but when we did get together to do something, we spent a good bit of time doing it. I don't like telling an actor what to do. I mean, to an extent, I mean, some shots you have to literally say, leave your arm there, and Sarah will get into this in a minute, I imagine, or, you know, just look ever so slightly to the left. But a lot of the time I would just say, look, you know, your character's going to make a sandwich. You know, you're exhausted, you're tired. What would you do? Or I'd say, Kathleen, you know, Anne is going to pick up a hot mug here. Now I'm going to make the shot look like the Searchers, you know, the very famous shot from the Searchers. and I would say, we're gonna follow you in here. You're just gonna go in and pick up some medicine, but do your thing. And we come back in, and of course we see Anne Russell standing holding the boiling kettle. But I knew what I was looking for in the shot. But for me, it's just, I need you to be as natural and as real. And, you know, what would you be doing in this situation? It's a neo-realist style of filmmaking. I mean, you've seen, like, Breathless would be a perfect example of it, you know, by Godard. You know, when you watch that film, it's just, you can see the go again, films by Ken Loach, like I, Daniel Blake, Sorry We Missed You, you know, I mean, even Ben Wheatley films like Kill List, you know, you just have to allow that realism to come in, and allow the actors just to be whatever version of that character they're going to be, and you get everything. You get gold. I mean, you might get 10 minutes of something that just doesn't work, but out of that 10 minutes, you're going to get 2 minutes of absolute pure gold. And when you see it on the screen, then it just pays complete and utter love then to everything the film is supposed to be, from its message to what it's supposed to look like, to the art form of just cinema in general. You can't restrict an actor, you know.
No, and that makes perfect sense as well. Like, I mean, looking at, and I'm going to come to Sarah here now, like a performance of Kleina in particular, I think is, like you mentioned about having to put an arm here or there, but Kleina's alone a lot, and she has to do an awful lot of her, you know, a characterization and like acting, like going an emotional arc, like almost silently without dialogue and stuff. And I imagine that does take a very specific kind of structure to the acting in terms of physicality. But also, Sarah, for you, like, how did you approach that? Did you have discussions back and forth about how Kleina would show this, or how do you feel about that kind of?
I think I probably took ownership of a lot of Kleina's characteristics myself. I, you know, obviously researched Asperger's syndrome, but I've worked with adults with autism in the past, so I would have some direct experience with that. But similarly to, as we were talking about the symptoms with cancer, you know, Asperger's can manifest itself in very different ways, and a lot of it is internalized. So, you know, for me, I really enjoy being completely immersed in a character. I lose all sight of what's going on around me, and I just enjoy that thing that Robbie does of just letting a camera go, and, you know, and yeah, just being in it. And like I said, kind of, I had thought a lot, and I mean, rehearsed solo about kind of mannerisms and thought processes and anxieties and all those things, and then just try as best as you can to portray them in a way that, you know, they come across in some shape or form.
It does. It comes across incredibly authentically, actually. And again, I say that it looks authentic to me, having not experienced anything like that. But it's certainly, you feel that from Kleina. Mary, for you, was it a similar process with Sam? Like, because obviously she's got so many things on her plate. Like, she's almost like a little microcosm of everything wrong with the country in a lot of ways. What was your process like in working with Robbie and like kind of developing, I suppose, Sam and like your approach to her?
Well, to echo what Sarah just said there, it was an absolute joy working with Robbie, just holding the handheld camera and letting you just be indulged for, you know, hours if you wanted to just get into a scene and to improvise through it. And I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed it, because, and enjoy is a very strange word, because you're actually going through trauma, but it's, as an actor, you feel like you've actually gone in there, you've delved into the deep recesses, and you've explored the truth, you know, of the moment. And I loved it. I loved working with Robbie in that there were scenes where I got to improvise. Now, lots of it we didn't get to keep, and I'd love to see the scenes. But say with John Connors, for example, we had big, long conversations for I don't know how long, and they were so traumatic, and they were, and and all the time I was thinking, while I was in it, I was thinking, this feels so real. And John's just so wonderful to act off. And yeah, it was brilliant. And the same thing with, he had a great group of kids to work with, and the kids were all fantastic. And I teach kids as well, so I know good kids when I see them, and they really were, you know, they were a joy to work with. But they were kids, and you got all that energy, that explosion of energy, and that thing that you're thinking of all that wonderfulness, and then you're thinking, this character, Sam, she can't really enjoy those kids and what they've got to give. She's just trying to struggle to cling on to the moments and get through the day. And she's worrying about the fact that, you know, these kids are not going to always be as happy as they are in that moment in time when they're doing their dancing or whatever. There's a difficult journey ahead, and it's dark, and she doesn't know how to get through it. And she doesn't have the support network. She doesn't have the finances and all that stuff that you do when you figure, oh, you go, okay, I have cancer. Right. First thing you do is you Google, what are the symptoms, blah, blah, blah. And then you know, you're going, okay, so what kind of, okay, it's stage 4. So what can I do? What can I do to survive? Okay, I have to work on diet. I have to work on self-exploration, find some support. She's none of that. She's having toast, the same as yesterday. And there's none of this aubergines and you know, fancy vitamins or anything for her, you know. And yeah, it's just, it was brilliant to get to just have the time to explore, and also to have just great people around to do that with.
Oh, fantastic. And like Kathleen, you mentioned this as well earlier about him working with Rob being great from an acting point of view, but I'm just going to ask yourself and Anne, yeah, maybe you first, Kathleen, as well. Would that be similar to your approach? Like when you were, I suppose, focusing on your character, like was it a similar kind of process to what Mary just described there?
Yeah, for sure. Well, luckily we have good actors to work with. Anne, and I had a scene with John Connors and Sarah and Rachel in our Lindsay in our scene in the kitchen. So it's great people to respond to. But I go to the physical stuff, you know, I sort of say, okay, what are the symptoms? What is the progression of the disease? What are the obstacles? Because they become the physical obstacles. And then you have the emotional obstacles of the character as well. You know, what do you desire and what's in the way of that? So once you do a lot of, and to get the physical stuff, I was really trying to, and also once we know that when cancer gets to the final stages, it can be in all different parts of the body in all different ways and things like that. And I did see that my sister had passed away of cancer. So I did see that. So you start to say, how do you do that physically in a way that's honest and, you know, and try to develop that. And then you say, what are these characters trying to do? So Robbie wisely said, oh, this is the day to day. Like, you know, my mother wants to have some toast or a biscuit or, you know, and we need to clean and we need to bathe and brush our hair and things like that, and how just the every day-to-day things become so impossible for someone who's struggling with this kind of a disease. And like you said earlier, I'd say everybody knows somebody who has had cancer. So
Well,
I get to work with Anne Russell, which is brilliant.
I go ahead of that.
Well, let's talk about that, Anne, because
what's funny actually.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry. What's funny? I'm just having a little flashback something here. So I arrived in kind of close to the end of filming one day. It was actually, again, spoiler alert, the scene just before Anne and Kathleen's characters died, you know. And I walk in, you know, there to collect the dog. And, Kathleen comes downstairs and goes, how's it going? And she like looked at me like, how's it going? Like, do you know what I just done up there? You know, it was real, like the intenseness of what the actors were going through when they were filming this was through the house. To like, my folks were there on the first day, and in the first 20 minutes they knew we need to leave every day and let these guys get on with this, because it was heavy what they were going through, you know, what they were living these lives. And although they're acting, like, it was Kathleen, I'll never forget it, the way she just was like the look I got was like, I was like, you know, the energy was so intense when the actors were when they were filming those scenes, you know, it was something to.
Absolutely, and like that gives you a nice jumping off point on this, because like what Phil was saying there, and then what Kathleen was saying about, like, you know, having great energy off the other actors and stuff. You and Kathleen have a lot of kind of very, I suppose, deep scenes like that as well. Like, is that something like you find kind of hard to like shake out of, or once you kind of get into that character, or is it something that you can kind of switch off a little bit afterwards?
Yeah, I think it sounds kind of strange in a way, but it kind of felt easy. Because I think the environment that was created for us, I think the one thing I felt about it was that Robbie was so respectful, because there were scenes where I was going to the toilet and there was all that stuff, you know, and he was always saying, "Now, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever you're comfortable with," you know. So there was nothing that I felt under pressure about. And the fact that Kathleen and I knew each other so well, I think that made it. I think it would have been a very different experience if it hadn't been for the environment and hadn't been for the fact that Kathleen and I knew each other. And it kind of, because of that respect, and I knew that Robbie really cared about this. Do you know what I mean? It actually felt kind of easy. And also because my character was in her own head, so she wasn't really aware of what was going on. I wasn't traumatized in the same way as they were. You know, I had this muddle going on in my head where I was trying to figure out what was going on, and it was coming and going, as you know, but it wasn't as harrowing for my character because of the lack of awareness, you know. So it was, it wasn't as hard, if you like. Does that make sense? You know?
100%. And like Kathleen, for you then, playing off that like energy from Anne, how was that for you then? That must have been, like, as Phil said, quite harrowing at times.
Your dream cast is somebody who's completely present moment to moment, and that's what Anne is completely. And whatever bounced between us, we both went with it, and that's, you know, there's no and you talk about it being easy. In a way, it was easy in that there was no obstacle. There was just play. It was like you do that, I do that, we do, and I respond, and we respond, and Robbie edited where he thought it needed an edit.
Yeah.
Very good. And Robbie, I'm just going to ask you, we were talking about this a bit before, how and maybe David and Philip as well, the structure of your shoot was like you kind of filmed each character's story as its own individual segment over a while. What was the rationale behind that? Was it like based on performance, and did one you shot the first week change anything in the second week?
The way we shot it was completely based on finances, because we didn't have any. So I would shoot each story almost as a short film. So we would do 3 days. I think the 4 scenes we shot were Kathleen and Anne's. So we done 3 days with them. And then after that, I think we had Sarah's block. So we done 3 days with Anne and Kathleen to do their story. Then we took a little break for a couple of weeks to get some more money together, and we done Sarah's stuff. Then we took another break then for a little while, and to get more money together for Mary Murray's. So like where we got our money was like Phil, we need money. Phil would come up with some money, or David would put a stand-up comedy show on. I would save what I could, and my brothers my brothers and family would give us some money, and Phil's mum and aunties would make all the sandwiches and lunches, and you know, myself and David would try and make some sandwiches, but they weren't the best. But that was it. We just money. Money was the big thing.
Well, it's certainly an interesting way of kind of going about doing it, and like I wouldn't have known watching it. They were all shot kind of separately in a lot of ways, because they're so well kind of interconnected and stuff. I'm going to ask you three guys a little bit about the edit and the post-production side of that. Did much change in that from what you initially envisioned? Because the way it ties together at the end, as we mentioned earlier, like is like so beautiful.
No, I knew as I was going what I wanted and what I needed. There was a little bit at the end that we had to cut out, which was unfortunate, which addressed a lot of the backstory of Anne Russell's character. It was this sequence we shot in the Magdalen homes. I think my camera might be lagging here. I'm not too sure.
No, you're okay.
So we had to jettison that, and there was some shots as well of Sarah and Mary that for the end sequence that didn't really work out. I kind of tried to pay homage to Psycho, where Sarah was sliding slowly into the bath, but we couldn't find a way to fit it in. There was some other great scenes. Like there was 2 big scenes with John Connors with Mary and Sarah that I couldn't shoehorn in, because it didn't make sense to have the scenes there, you know. But all in all, the finished product is as close to what I wanted from the get-go as I could possibly get, you know.
That's fantastic. And as you said, like the product finished at that point, and Phil mentioned earlier about like then trying to get it in front of audiences and people. Before we come to that, where was the first time you all saw it together? Did you all see it at the one screening, or were you in different places?
In the Odeon, in the Point. Yeah.
I had seen a very rough cut at one point, but that was the first time I had seen Mary and Sarah's work. It was the first time so it was really blew me away. I get emotional when I think about it, because they were brilliant, you know. And then we saw it, of course, in the big screen when it was fully ready in the audience.
How's it feeling with other people as well? Because like emotion resonates, you know, like the more bodies in the room, the more emotion there is, I think. And like you said, being so emotional around their story, like what was that like seeing with an audience of people?
It was absolutely incredible. It was such a moving experience, and just so, I mean, is rewarding a word? Like, I don't know. It was fantastic. I was so moved by the reaction of the audience on the night as well. And just like genuinely, you know, I mean, I can't speak highly enough of watching these 3 women on screen. I just loved it. I was so absorbed in their stories, and yeah, I thought it was amazing.
Like Kathleen said, like when she was blown away by yourself and Mary's art, like how was that the first time you'd seen Kathleen and Anne's story and Mary's story?
Yeah, first time we'd all seen it together for sure. Like Kathleen said, we probably saw rough cuts, or, you know, small maybe parts or parts of a scene of our own work, but no, that was the first time we saw the whole thing.
And Anne, for you, like you saw in the Odeon as well.
Yes, yeah, I saw it in the Odeon. That was my first time. Yeah.
And how was it? And had you seen any of the other guys' stories on screen?
No, I hadn't. No, and it was just like, my God, you know, to see it all come together was extraordinary, and so heartrending, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think as well, it was everybody's first time seeing the opening and closing of the film.
Yeah.
You know, because it has that Wizard of Oz moment. So nobody expected it, because it gets to a point in the film where nobody knows how it's going to end. And then we knew, I think David and Phil had seen a rough cut at the end, and they were just like, oh my, like, man, we really got to touch. And I think it was, I can't remember who it was when we realized that the nun sequence wasn't working, which is unfortunate because we had some fantastic actors in that scene, but it just couldn't shoehorn it in. And then I knew when everybody had sat in the audience, we were all waiting on the ending to come up, and you know, it had the effect that we were hoping for.
It is staggering, like an ending. Mary, how was it for you seeing that kind of the 3 stories come together in that ending? Because like it's been black and white for the whole middle, and then it just opens up.
Yeah, the same when I watch the other actresses play their parts. You know, when you watch yourself, you're kind of going, oh, is that right or whatever. But when you watch other people do just incredible work, you do just go, oh, I'm so, you know, that's what makes you feel proud to be part of it, is when you're watching these beautiful performances, and especially stuff you didn't get to see before, you know. And yeah, the payoff at the end is just stunningly beautiful. And yet for me, just that, like, just watching Sarah, she's just so beautiful. Like the whole way through the film, you just can't take your eyes off her. She's magnetic. And then the story between Anne and Kathleen, it broke my heart. My heart was, and the song still plays in my head. Skiddy marinka dinky dink. I can't get it out of my head. And it's just so beautiful. And the end, yeah, it's like, it really is like watching art, like just.
I have to say, like, as a mum of 3 kids watching those end scenes, I can't, like, I the whole audience was just completely choked up. The silence was so powerful at the end. The kind of, everybody honestly had to just take a moment.
And what Phil said was that was Robbie's vision from the get-go. So when those 2 guys get together, Robbie had every shot, every film that inspired him. And when we started to see it all come together, because at the end of the day, it was his vision, his driving force. He kept on pushing everybody, but there was this beautiful environment of a safe place for the actors to create. So to be in the audience of that screen and for everyone to witness it together, knowing we had something special, but it could have gone completely the opposite way. So like the chopping block was on Robbie's name and his vision and direction to make a film like this. But I think we all felt it together, that the power of the cast, the relationship, and then the story just unfolded for everybody. I think it was a moment that we were all kind of, it took back because COVID was still happening, you know, the restrictions and numbers, and there was more pressure, things happening, but to sit in that audience and watch that moment was a powerful feeling that we'd done it, we created something. And Robbie, that was the vision that he told everybody that got involved from the get-go. And then to witness that, he's like, yeah, that's why we're involved, you know. And it was from day one, that vision and that passion to tell a story so delicate and let these actors just create magic on screen. And that's just...
Well, you've hit the nail on the head there, David. I think it was Frank Berry I spoke to once. He said, like, you know, why do you go to the cinema? He goes, you go to the cinema to feel something, to be moved. It doesn't matter if it's necessarily a positive feeling or a negative feeling. Like, you can be entertained in its escapism, but cinema is about feeling something, I think. And like, Robbie, I can imagine for you in that room, like, obviously it must have been a huge weight on you, like other people seeing it, but like, just to kind of what Kathleen was saying there, I think with Sarah, just that kind of dead silence at the end, that something you made had affected people so much in that way you'd envisioned.
Yeah, I mean, to see the finish, it was difficult trying to explain, because the film is layered, you know. I mean, it's set against the backdrop of the cervical check, yeah, but there's so many different layers and controversies essentially that are addressed that we address in the film. It's also a real Rorschach test for anyone who watches it, because you're going to identify with the character that you feel closest to, or you feel is more of, oh my God, my life is like that, you know. So I knew that how it was going to look, how it was going to start, how it was going to finish, but trying to articulate that to people at times was difficult, which is where I got very lucky with the cast and crew we got. Now, I mean, when it came to some of the crew in the early days, that when we were trying to get people on board, they just didn't get it and they just didn't want to be on board. But with the cast we got and the crew we got, it was spectacular. I think I'm lagging again here, so.
No, you seem fine on my end anyway.
You're good,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so when the film itself played, because we self-distributed the film, we couldn't get a distributor and we couldn't get a festival to accept us, but the cinemas who we approached, the bookers adored the film and they were like, we want to show this. How do we get this out? And I'm like, yeah, here it is. And when we premiered it and showed it to people, they sat down and it was hate. It was a mix of hate and mix of anger, a mix of sadness. And yeah, I mean, for me to sit and watch it and realize how it was going to look, and to see some of the shots I adore in cinema in general in my own film, it didn't feel like mine at times, you know. When I watched it at the end of it, you know, I knew like we had like I had the dream team to make the picture look the way it did, you know. And it was an amazing feeling, but it's bittersweet because of what it is, you know.
Absolutely, I can only imagine. And you mentioned there about, like, you know, difficulty with distributors and stuff with the bookers. Like, just, I mean, are people going to be able to see this like online? How do people get to see what, as David correctly says, is a very important kind of time capsule of something like this?
It will be available on streaming very soon. We're holding out. I'm holding out a little bit because it's gonna make a premiere in London, and it will be screening in Washington soon. It's going to get a release over in a cinema in Washington. I think we're working on something in LA, are we, David?
Yeah, it's just that independent voice that when Robbie rings you up when he has a dream and a vision, and he's going to make that dream a reality. So it's just great that these building relationship with independent cinemas, and you're dealing with them directly. And you know, it's a big deal when they take on a film because it's a business as well. So it's been amazing, the journey and the support, and try and get people to get eyes on this film to come see. And for anyone who's watching this today, I just ask, take the time, watch the film, and talk to the actors and talk to Robbie, because they love to talk about their art, their craft, and they're all masters of what they do. So I think if anyone knows Robbie, he's a film man. He filmed from the 1900s, so it's his joy and his passion. So all I'd say is watch it and then talk to the talent, because they love to talk about it. And that's where I think this is beautiful, because you're seeing that. You're seeing real passion. I like to call them lifers. These people are in this game for the rest of their life, and that ain't going to change. That's what I love about it, you know?
I don't think I could sum anything up better than that. That was great, David. And I think that's probably a good place to leave it. Guys, I just want to say again, like, congratulations on the film. It really is a very, very moving piece of work. And it's been really, really insightful hearing how it was made and the process the four brilliant actors put into it, as well as you guys buying into Robbie's dream and Robbie, what he delivered. Just echo what David said, anyone watching this live or the recording version afterwards, please do seek out the film and do engage with Robbie and the guys. Like, it's a great piece of work that needs to be talked about more, not just on the issue, but as the film itself that captures that. So guys, just want to say thank you again. Thank you, Robbie, David, Phil, Kathleen, and Mary and Sarah. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you guys. And please
so
keep
much,
up
Gareth. It's been great.
good work.
Million.
So we just got one message here from Manuel Okoye, who says, brilliant chat, guys. Very clear how much care and attention was put into making the film and treating the stories of these women with respect. Love seeing the passion in Robbie's voice. And well done everyone involved. So I think that's probably as good a statement as I can.
You forgot to say, and great moderating from Gar.
That would just make me seem obnoxious.
Self-praise is no praise, so I'm going to give it to you. Manuel did.
Guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you everyone for tuning in as well. We'll be back tomorrow, where we turn to the team behind Deadly Cuts and on Colin Keane. So do keep an eye on IFTA.ie for those, and more coming next week. But once again, thank you so much to the team behind the letters.